today's lesson. So, we've been busy with some finance and growth. The last time we looked at timelines and we looked at nominal and effective interest rate. Now we're going to look at the concept of sinking fund. What does it mean to have a sinking fund? And this clearly links to what we call depreciation, which is the loss of value of goods and services. So that's what we're going really to be talking about. That's the main thing here. So just to start afresh, we're just gonna do a quick revision of all of those things and then see how it links to the concept that we need to do for today. Let's just jump right into it. Now, our main idea is sinking fund. Remember that we've looked at the concept of finance, and finance we looked at two branches, which was growth and decay. But now with this particular lesson, sinking fund links to the concept of compound interest and reducing balance decay. And then also what I want you to think about is why certain assets and equipment normally lose value, because you know that's really what happens. And those things we're talking about, those assets and equipment, it's like your computers, your consoles, your cars as your assets. Those are the things we're talking about. They normally lose value. Why? Because of things like wear and tear. So the laptop that you bought today, you can't sell it at the same price next year because you've used it, and it might now be a slower PC or something like that. Similarly with a car that you bought yesterday, you definitely cannot sell it tomorrow at the same price. Why? Because of wear and tear and all of that. So those are just things you need to be thinking about. Also, why do we buy the same assets and equipment at a higher price after a certain period of time? Guys, let's just talk about this. Like, guys, okay, I'm a very lover of Audi, right? So, if I buy my Audi today, clearly tomorrow, the very same Audi that I want, I will buy it at a slightly higher price. Why? Because they would have modified it and added maybe one more button in the car, or they would have then, I'm just kidding, but they would have actually made it a bit faster in terms of the engine, and maybe the interior might be different, or the exterior might be different, the bumper might have changed. You see, so that's one example that I can give you. Similarly with our laptops, if you buy an HP laptop today, you know tomorrow it's going to be a bit higher. You buy a Lenovo, and all of these things are because we are always constantly trying to upgrade these goods and services and equipment that we have. So that's why we might have to buy them at a higher price after a certain duration of time, after actually having used the very same asset, and you are saying you want to upgrade it. Definitely you're not going to say, okay, let's just exchange. I take the very same one but an upgraded one, and I give you the one that I was using. You see, you will sell it but at a lower price because it has lost value. That's the first question. And then buy that one at a higher price because it is modified or something like that. So those are just things you need to really be thinking about. Also, what can you do to help you top up the book value to cover the higher price, right? So if maybe today I am buying my car and it's 250,000, tomorrow I want to buy it again, and by the way, tomorrow I mean after maybe 5 years or so, I want to buy the very same car, but now a modified version or a later version of it. I would then buy it at a higher price. But now, if I sell mine and I get maybe, let's say, 150,000, and the one that I want to buy is now 500,000, there's a big gap between those two amounts. The amount that I will get when I sell mine and the amount that I want to buy it for. The difference there, what can I then do to try and come up with a plan that will help me to get that difference, so that as soon as I sell it, I take the difference, I add it, I buy what I want. So those are the things that you need to be thinking about, especially under the concept of sinking fund. Now, let's just make a scenario. You buy a PlayStation 5 for an amount of 13,000 now. Clearly, this is one top console at the moment because you look at it has been modified and all of those things from, we started with PlayStation 1, 2, 3. So clearly when you get to 5, it means there's like better features that are there. How much will you then be able to sell it for when a newer version is released in 5 years? So if you buy it now, but in 5 years' time there is a newer version, maybe PlayStation 5.1, you see, 5.0, how much will you be able to sell this PlayStation 5 after the 5 years when that new version is then released? Also, how much will the newer version cost in 5 years? So this will be the new price of that particular console after 5 years. One thing we need to remember before, as we're thinking about that PlayStation scenario of ours, is most assets really lose value over time, especially vehicles and equipment. And the loss of value is called depreciation. So we call the loss of value depreciation, or decay, because that's one of the other terms that we normally use. And depreciation is always compounded annually. So depreciation is something that always happens at the end of the year. It's nothing about monthly and all of that. Yes, it might be that tomorrow I will sell it at a different price, which is lower, and next month at a different price, which is lower, but it is normally about a yearly thing. The more years you are using this particular maybe vehicle or equipment, the less it's going to be worth. Now, just to do a quick recap as well, remember our decay is a straight line and a reducing balance, but right now our main focus is on reducing balance. When you talk about the concept of sinking fund, we only focusing on reducing balance. Why? Because we just said now that depreciation is normally compounded annually, right? So compounded annually is about compound interest, compounded annually. So this is about compound interest, but under depreciation. So those are the things you need to really be thinking about. And then remember, the equation for depreciation on a reducing balance method is given by A is equals to P into 1 minus I to the exponent of n. I'm pretty much sure that these formulas are now stuck in your brain because we've really been exhausting them. You don't really need the formula sheet or to go to your textbook anymore. Remember, the A value is normally what you call the scrap or the book value. At times they call it the trade-in value, right? So at times they call it the trade-in value. And then P will be the principal amount. What do you buy your goods and services for now? Remember the PlayStation scenario? We said you buy it for 13,000. That's what the P will be. But the A will be a value less than the 13,000 because you would have used it and it would have lost some value. And then I will be the rate of depreciation, N will be the number of periods. Now going back to our scenario, remember we said you want to buy a PlayStation now for an amount of that. Will you? So these are decisions that you are making as you are trying to say, okay, I want to buy it, but can I think about it first? Will I be able to sell it at the very same price when a newer version is released in 5 years' time? Clearly not, but let's just see whether it will be the case or not the case, right? So how much will the PlayStation be worth after 5 years if depreciation is calculated at 4.5% per annum on a reducing balance method? So let's look at this, right? If I want to calculate this, remember I'm looking for A, which is what I do not know. My I is 4.5%, so my formula will be on a reducing balance method, so it's 1 minus I to the exponent of n. My P value is the 13,000. 1 minus my I value is 4.5, so that's 0.045. And this will be to the exponent of 5, right? So this is for 5 years. Now, if you want to calculate this, it's going to be 13,000 into 1 minus 0,045 to the exponent of 5. And it will actually be worth 10,326, right? So this will be 10,336, I think. Let me just verify quickly. And 26, not 36. So this is 26. 26 and a couple of cents after there, right? Now, we go back to our question. Will I be able to buy this thing? It will actually be worth 10,326 and 67 cents. So if I go back to my question asking you, will you be able to sell it at the very same price in 5 years' time? Our answer will then be definitely no. Why? Because of the concept of depreciation. So guys, when we make decisions in life, we don't just make decisions for the sake of making, especially that involve money. You don't just make them just because you're making them. You consider factors like, if I want to buy a newer model, if I want to sell this one, what will happen? Will I be making a loss? Will I be winning? Will I be getting profit from this? Will I not be getting any profit? So those are the things you need to be thinking about before you can even purchase anything that is of maybe a liability for that matter. Because really, it is nice to have a PlayStation, but it is really worth it at that point. So it's one of those things that it's an individual perspective and it's an individual opinion really that we're dealing with. Now, remember our last question will be, will you be able to buy the newer version at the same price, right? So the question will be no. Why? Because of inflation. Remember, inflation will be the rate at which the goods and services are increasing. So it will not be possible for you to buy it at the same price. So the two big concepts here is depreciation and inflation, right? Depreciation will be the rate at which the goods and services are going down, especially vehicles, equipment, and all of those. Inflation will be the rate at which goods and services are going up. What I bought today for 2 rands, definitely tomorrow, it will not be 2 rands anymore. It will be maybe 3 rands. But if I want to sell what I bought for 2 rands, I cannot sell it for 2 rands or 2 rand 50. I will have to sell it for maybe 1 rand 50 or 1 rand. So you see, that's the conversation that we are having with one another now to say, exactly what does it mean for me to buy something, it loses value, I want to sell it, and then I want to buy the new one. What exactly does that mean? So think about that, and I'll be back with some more after the quick ad break. Hi guys, welcome back. So we are still busy with some financial maths, and we have been looking at the concept of sinking fund. Now we've looked at what it means for things to lose value because of time, and we even tried to brainstorm on the ideas of what it means, why it would then be losing value. Things like wear and tear, things like maybe a newer version at the time is out, and all of those things. So those are just the things you need to be thinking about. The last question now that we actually looked at about the PlayStation 5 was, if I wanted to buy a newer version after 5 years when I sell my own, remember the one that I wanted to sell was roughly 10,000 something. If now I want to buy a newer one, will I then be able to buy it at the same price, meaning at 13,000 still? And we saw that no, it's not the fact. Why? Because the concept was inflation. So we're going to try and investigate further on what is inflation and what it is all about. So let's just look at that quickly. Now, remember, we're still talking about growth, the simple interest. Now, under the concept of inflation, the thing that we are talking about, the main thing that we're talking about is actually compound interest. And therefore, inflation will then be the rate at which the price of goods and services increase every year. Remember, I spoke about a typical example of like bread, a typical example of things like going to a doctor. It was cheaper maybe 3 years ago, but now there's newer equipment that they are now using to try and help us with our health. So that's why they are now a bit charging us more. It's not because they're just making money, it's because now they have invented things that can make us be screened maybe for certain diseases quicker and all of that. So that rate at which they increase at is called inflation. And the inflation can vary from year to year. You know that every year there is something that is added onto the goods and services that we buy. I mean, the previous year of us buying bread, it was this price. Next year, you know, it will be another maybe 2 rands more, 3 rands more, to a point where it will even get to being 50 rands of us buying bread. But then that's something that we need to think about in the future. The South African Reserve Bank, which are the people that are actually responsible for us having money in the country and the flow of money, and the treasury, they normally aim to keep the inflation rate between 3 and 6% per annum, right? So the rate of inflation we're talking about, it increasing. So they normally increase it by between 3 and 6%. And they've actually tried to target the inflation rate to be at the midpoint of these two, which is roughly 4.5%. And this is just based on statistics and how things have been happening in our country. Now also, the effect of inflation is normally compounded over time. So that's why I said we are mainly focusing on compound interest. Then you also need to notice that even when the rate of inflation decreases, the prices are still increasing, but now at a slower rate. So you need to understand exactly what this means, right? I am saying to you, yes, the rate of inflation is decreasing, but that does not mean that the price of goods and services is also decreasing. That will never happen, actually. It just means that the rate at which they are increasing is a bit slower, though they are still increasing. So that's one dilemma that you need to be thinking about. That next year, it doesn't mean that if our rate of inflation is lower, then the goods and services price will decrease. No, it will also increase, or it will still increase, but now at a slightly slower rate as opposed to the other years when the rate of inflation is high. So that's one thing that you just need to be thinking about when it comes to inflation. Also, you must consider inflation when making investment decisions. This is a big idea, guys. This is a big deal. When you are trying to invest money, inflation plays a big role in how much you are going to get after a certain duration of time. So let me just try maybe give you a scenario, right? So let's say they said to you, interest is going to be 6% per annum on your investment, right? And then you do get the 6% maybe for the first year. And for the second year, it so happens that the rate of inflation or inflation rate is actually at 7.5 because of maybe the bad financial year that our country is having. That would therefore mean that you're going to actually have a loss in your investment as opposed to be making a gain. So those are the things that you always need to factor in when you're trying to calculate your investment and playing with the numbers, guys. Really, if you do your maths right, I promise you, you can play the numbers and the numbers will do what you want them to do. But only if you are realistic about it and you understand what you are doing. So just look at those things. So you need to consider inflation when trying to save or invest, but mainly when you are investing, because saving, remember, it's like a short-term goal thing. Investing is a long-term goal thing. So you can invest for 5 years, right? For those 5 years, you find that you are gaining money and all of that, and then leave it again for the next other 5 years, you find that in the next 5 years, you are making a big loss. Why? Because of inflation. So those are things that you just need to be thinking about when making your investments. And remember, again, I will still keep on saying, all of this does not constitute as financial advice. It is merely Sia talking about maths and showing you how the numbers work, especially because maths, to me, is food for the soul. And I hope it can also work for you. But let's just quickly go back to the previous example that we were looking at about compound interest, right? So compound interest, the key ideas here, or the key words are the term or the length of time, the principal amount, our accumulated amount, the interest rate, and the compounding period, which is the very most important thing, because under compound interest, remember, you don't only get interest on a yearly basis. At times you can get it on a monthly basis, or you can get it on a quarterly basis, or even on a daily basis. They can even push it to being on a daily basis. But remember, per annum, that's what will be divided into months, quarters, days, weeks, or semi-annuals in a year. And the formula for us to calculate compound growth or compound interest, so remember it's compound growth or compound interest, will then be given by A is equals to P into 1 plus I to the exponent of N. And I think, guys, by now, these formulas, I keep on saying, they must really be engraved in your brains now, because we've really been exhausting these formulas. So you will not need your textbook anymore to know what these formulas are. But just go to it when you're trying to refer and make sure that you are on the right track with your formulas. Now, going back to our previous example about buying a PlayStation, right? How much will the PlayStation cost now in 5 years' time? If now we are changing it, it's no longer depreciation now. Now it's the rate of inflation, which is calculated at the very same rate of depreciation that we are having, and this is compounded annually. Now, what does this mean? We are trying to say to you, if this particular asset that you are buying, in this context, PlayStation 5, is growing at a rate of 4.5% per annum, compounded annually, how much will it then be costing you after the 5 years? And the whole point of what you're trying to do, we're trying to compare between you selling it after 5 years at the same rate and you maybe buying the new one after 5 years at the same rate. That's what we are going to try and compare and actually look at what exactly does it mean for our big idea, which is sinking fund. So let's just try and perform this calculation and see what's happening here. Now we're trying to find the value of A. I always start with my formula, and I would advise you to always do that as well, so that you know where you are substituting. The P value is 13,000 into 1 plus the interest is 4.5 compounded annually, so it won't really change it because I'm dividing by 1. So it means it's 0.045. But for people like myself who are still understanding maths, let's just divide by 1 so that we take into consideration the compounding period. And this will be to the exponent of 5 multiplied by 1 there. Then I will just go straight to my calculator. Can I just pick that up from the calculator? Sure. Okay, so I will just go straight to my calculator and see what exactly this will be. So remember, you bought this for 13,000, and the rate of inflation is 4.5, so 0.045, and this is to the exponent of 5. And therefore, this will give me 16,237 cents, right? So this will be 16,200, and let me just see my cents there. 37 cents. 37 cents, or 37 there, sorry about that. So that's what it will then cost after 5 years, right? If our rate of inflation was at that point. Now let's look at the comparison now of exactly what were we trying to achieve with all of this. How much will this cost, right? We just looked at it. It will cost us that much. Now, our big idea here is sinking fund, right? Remember that. So remember we looked at how much it will cost if the depreciation is at 4.5. Now we looked at how much it will cost if the rate of inflation is at 4.5. Now we're looking at the concept of sinking fund and how those two ideas that we spoke about link to this concept of sinking fund. Sinking fund will be a savings fund with a target. Target, what does that mean? Guys, I want to buy a new PlayStation in 5 years' time. I must top it up, right? I'm going to sell my PlayStation, they give me 10,000 something. I want to buy the new one, it's 16,000 something. So what does that mean? I am short of 6,200 and a couple of cents there. So I will then open up a savings account. My target is that after selling mine, I take the 6,000 from my savings account, I top it up, and then I buy what I want to buy. So that's the big idea. That's the main goal here that we're trying to look at. I will repeat again. The target will be, I open the savings account so that when I sell my PlayStation and I get the 10,000 something, I can then withdraw my savings, top them up, and then buy the new PlayStation. So that's the concept of what a sinking fund is all about. Now, this will be the difference between the future value of an asset and the scrap value of the asset. Now, let's look at what exactly does this mean. If I write it in terms of a formula, you don't necessarily need to write it as this formula because you will normally be given this as a hierarchy. So you'll always need to first find the scrap value, the future value or the new price, and then sinking fund. So you just need to subtract the two. But if I wanted to give you the formula, this is how the formula will look. So remember, this will be the concept of inflation, and this will be the concept of decay. I'll just write decay because depreciation is a bit longer to write. Now, going back to our previous question, remember, scrap value was that much, the new price was that much. If you want to find our sinking fund, quickly to my calculator, I will then say this is 16,237 cents, and minus that amount there, which is 10,326 and 67 cents, and that will be 5,873, right? So that's what will then be my sinking fund there. So you can see my sinking fund value will then be 5,873 and 70 cents. And the big idea now here with this sinking fund will be, I will then be opening up a savings account to say, okay, now I just bought mine, let me open a savings account. Maybe I'm gonna contribute to it on a monthly basis, or I'm just gonna save this much so that it can grow to being the 5,000 something after 5 years. Then I can withdraw it after I sell mine and buy the new PlayStation. So guys, that's the whole idea of whatever that we're talking about with the concept of sinking fund. Let me just let that sink in as well with you there, and I'll be back with some more. Stay tuned. Hi guys, welcome back to the last segment of the show. I hope you're having fun, and I hope you've been telling your friends to tune in as well if they haven't been tuning in and they were not watching with you. So make sure that all of them are actually watching, because they're really going to benefit from all these lessons that we are doing. And if they couldn't, next time they can still. So just let them know when the show is playing based on what you've seen so far, and let them tune in as well so that they can all benefit. Because after all, we all want to do well in mathematics. Now, in this lesson, we've been busy with the concept of sinking fund. We looked at what does it mean to actually have things lose value, what does it mean to have things gain in terms of value, which is the inflation, and we looked at the difference between these two and what does that then link to, which is the big idea, which was sinking fund. And sinking fund, remember what we said, it was a savings plan with a particular target, right? A savings fund with a target in mind. So you're not just saving. Maybe you want to buy those nice kicks, or you want to buy yourself a new PlayStation, as you saw with the example that we've been looking at. So right now, let's just do a quick revision of everything that we've done so far in this lesson, and then try and answer one more question and see exactly how that will then link down to what we wanted to talk about in our lesson. So let's just look at it. Now, remember that we've been looking at the concept of finance, growth and decay. Those are the two main branches. Under growth, we have two types. Under decay, we have two types. But we have been specifically looking at the compound growth and the reducing balance method decay. Now, what we've actually looked at was the concept of sinking fund. Remember, sinking fund was a savings fund with a target, right? And this had to do with you trying to say, I want to top up this amount because I want to do this, right? So I want an X amount of money in 5 years' time, but I would have a Y amount of money after those 5 years. The difference between the two will be the savings fund that I will be putting in place. And then the difference is rather between the future price and the scrap value of that same asset will be the same thing as what that fund is going to be, which is actually the sinking fund. Now, remember our big idea, guys, or the main example that we've been using is you wanted to buy, or you bought rather, a PlayStation 5 for an amount of 13,000 now, right? And then will you be able to sell this at the very same price when the newer version of it comes out in 5 years' time? And we saw that no, it's not possible. Because of the concept of depreciation. We also asked ourselves the question, will I then be able to buy the new version at the same price that I bought it at 5 years ago? And we saw as well that no, it's not possible. Why? Because of inflation. And here, that's where you actually need to start, guys, before you can buy anything, right? Especially these gadgets of ours, or these consoles, or these tangible things that we like buying, and they are expensive, yet they depreciate in value drastically so. So if you look at this, you need to be considering that if I buy this console now, right, or I buy this machine now, I buy a photocopy machine now, I buy a car now, will I be able to sell the very same asset that I bought now at the same price or not? The fact is, it's really unlikely. It will be, yes, close to maybe the amount depending on the rate of depreciation, but it's really unlikely that that will be the case, right? Why? Because of depreciation. Also, you need to think about, if I then want to buy the very same thing that I have the same asset, but a newer version of it. Maybe it's a bit flatter than the previous one, or it has features that now I am enjoying and the processor is faster. Will I then be able to buy it at the same price? The reality of the matter is as well, no. Why? Because of inflation. Let's just quickly recap on what depreciation and inflation is all about. Remember that most assets lose value over time, especially vehicles and equipment. And this is what depreciation is all about, right? It's about the loss of value of goods and services, especially vehicles and equipment, because that's really what normally wears and tears. So no one really wants to use a laptop that you've been using for 10 years and they want to buy it for 20,000 from you. No matter how good you think your laptop is, it really will not happen. And this is normally on a yearly basis, hence it's compounded annually. Also, remember the concept of inflation was the rate at which the price of goods and services increase every year, right? This is an every year thing. And this normally varies when it comes to year and year, because this year it might be that our inflation rate is 6%, or it might be our inflation rate next year is 5%. But remember, we saw that even if it does happen that our inflation rate is low, it does not really mean that we're going to be buying at a cheaper price. No, it just means that the rate at which the goods are increasing will be a bit slower. Now, we looked at the concept of sinking fund from the previous question, right? Where we said, if I want to sell it, it won't be at the same price. It will be at a very less price. Sorry about that. And if I want to buy the new one, it will also need to be at the same price. It will be at that price. And then we found that the difference between these two will then give me the value of the sinking fund, which was 5,873 rands and 70 cents. So clearly, you will still need a lot of money for you to top up what you would have got if you were selling it. And really, I just used the midpoint inflation rate here as subjected to what the Treasury has been saying and all of that. But it's really at times not the actual fact that is happening. It might happen that the rate of inflation makes this to even go to being 20,000, right? I mean, if you look at PlayStation 4, guys, PlayStation 4 was roughly something like 7,000 and odd. And now PlayStation 5, you look at it, it's like your 16,000, 11,000 something. So you can see that the rate that it has gone up with is quite very drastic. Now, what you then would want to do is you would want to replace your PlayStation 5 for a new version in 5 years' time. And then you need your sinking fund to have a value of 5,873 rands and 70 cents, right? You have 2,500 to invest now. What you will then want to know is how much interest must it then get in terms of your investment, so that after the 5 years, you can have the 5,000 something that you need. But now, let's look at this, guys. I need to pay 13,000 now. I need to take out 2,500 rands as an investment. So that amounts to what? 15,500. That I actually need to cough out now, so that I can just use this console and then get a newer version after 5 years. But we know that there are people who really like their games, and it's a personal opinion and all of that. So everyone has their opinion and things that they actually like using. Some of us might maybe like cars, some people like phones, some people like laptops. So it's those things, and you're always looking at a newer version of what you like every time. So you will need to then put up a sinking fund of 2,500, but you will need to know what is the interest rate, because you have this amount here, 2.5. Your goal is to get 5,873 rands and 70 cents. In between there, you must know what will be the rate of interest that you're going to be getting each and every year, so that you can meet that target. So you see, I just said everything is not financial advice that I'm giving you. No, I'm just showing you numbers. So with maths, I can know to say, if I was to be given this interest and they say it's a fixed interest for me, I promise you, I would really be in a good place. after 5 years when I want to buy the newer version of my PlayStation 5 so that I can continue with the fun of it all. But let's see exactly what will the interest be if you wanted to then take this option. So our A value is 5,873.70. Just remember to include that, the zero there. And our principal amount is 2,500. The I value is what you are trying to find. What must be my rate so that I can get to that point, and the number of years will then be 5. So with my formula for this, remember investment under inflation, or that is linked to inflation, has to do with compound interest. So that will be 1 plus I to the exponent of n up there. Now I know the value of A is 5,873 and 70 cents. My principal amount is 2,500. 1 plus, I want to find what is the interest, and this is for 5 years. Now this goes back to the idea that I spoke about, guys, to say you need to understand this. Whenever you look at the value of A, it is the same as us saying this is the future value, because in the future I want to have 5,873 and 70 cents. But now, presently, I have 2,500. I want to know what negotiation must I have with my broker if I'm using a broker, or my bank if I'm using a bank, or even a company if I'm investing in a company. What conversation must I have with them to say, okay, guys, I want this percentage. And remember, when you start, you normally start at a percentage higher than that, so that when you start negotiating, you can go down a bit and get to the percentage that you really, really want. Because at the end of the day, you do not want to make a loss. You want to continue playing your gadgets in a very nice way, as a person that maybe prefers to do that. So let's look at what will this be. So if I go to my calculator, so remember that we're saying that our A value is 5,873 rands and 70 cents. Then I'm going to divide this by the value of P, because I need to get rid of it. So that's 2,500, and that will give me that. Remember, guys, to always try and not round off your answers, right? So I'm going to write this. It's 34948. So it's comma 34948. I think this was 2 there. So let's just verify quickly. Yes. And then it is actually equals to 1 plus I to the exponent of 5. Don't make the mistake of, let me just use a different color, multiplying this with that and multiplying this with that. Please, really, that does not exist here, right? It's algebra, I know, but we do not use that here. The 5 means that you must open 5 brackets if we're to look at this from an algebra perspective. So make sure that you don't do that mistake there. So let me erase it, because then people will think it's actually what you're supposed to do. And therefore, if I go back to my calculator, I will need to take out a 5th root on both sides. So I will call this a 5th root. And therefore, if I take out a 5th root on both sides, just say shift that, I go up there, remove the 3, put my 5 there, and then I will just say answer. You see, I'm not writing it in a rounded off manner or anything like that. I will say answer and then write it down so that we quickly verify that we're doing the right thing. So you see, that's what I get. Let's say I say the 5th root off again, the one that now I wrote down, not 8, 5, sorry. Then it was 2, 3, 4, 9, 4, 8, right? See, it gives me that, which is exactly the same as that. So just always try, by all means, avoid using the on button when you are doing your financial math, so that your calculator can keep on storing your answers as you are calculating. Then you can always just press answer, answer, answer. And then you know that from here I will need to subtract 1 on both sides, because that's a very long number for me to write, which is a decimal. Then you'll multiply this by 100, which gives me 18.63%. So it means my I will be 18.63%. So you can see that with this, it will be possible for me to get this rate, but yay, it will really be very, very minimal chances of me getting this particular rate of an investment. But it's one conversation that you can have. So far, guys, we've actually looked at the concept of finance. We looked at simple interest, compound. We looked at decay, which was straight line and reducing balance method. And then today, our main idea or our main concepts were compound interest and the reducing balance method depreciation. Then a quick summary is certain assets definitely do lose value over time, and this loss of value is normally called depreciation. Remember, the inflation is the rate at which the price of goods and services increase every year. So that's all that I have for you guys. Think about it. These things are not really just me doing my maths. No, it's things that you need to be thinking about with decisions that you're going to make when you're forcing your parents to get you a certain gadget and all of that. Just always consider this and then make smart decisions. Guys, remember, mathematics is food for the soul. From me to you, see you next time.